So yeah, so we in our process we see many people who are new over here. So we will quickly walk you through who we are and when we got started. We have a short video about our introduction as well as about the Jyotish Mela as well. So we will run it for 3 minutes. And very quickly, we are a non-profit organization, and we started in 2020 while our root belongs like almost 30 years back. So we started with the blessing of Pujya Dayanand Saraswati. And we have been running Jyotish conference from last, I will say, almost 27 years. So this year is going to be 27th year. Luckily, there was no gap in the annual conference. And we are very fortunate to have world famous masters has been teaching on the Jyotish conference. So as you can see the names as well as their pictures over here, Dr. Charak, Vinay Aditya, VP Goel, A.B. Shuklaji, one of the big name, I did not say, the Karve Guruji was also a part of it, and then followed by VP Goel, Vinay Aditya. So many more names which you are seeing over here. We are very fortunate to have them here. So instead of, so our conference is also scheduled. So it's scheduled from November 6th, 7th. So it's only on weekend and a virtual conference. So I would like to take you through, instead of talking about a lot about it, I would like to request Saurav to start the video for it. Saurav, are you ready with the video? So we just talked about the speakers who are speaking. So as you can see, the names also here, and we saw it in the video as well. So many topics has been confirmed with the speakers. From the Goel ji, Saptamsha, and there is a new topic also. He's talking about lot of Gemini. We are going to see from the Marc Boney as well as from the Vinay ji. And you can always get into the details of it when you are going to jyotish.com, like jyotish.com/upcoming conference. You can find it over there. This time, the Andrew Dutta is also teaching with us for the first time, like the way the Marc Boney is teaching for the first time. So Andrew Dutta is going to talk about KP astrology. Simon is going to talk about finance, financial astrology, about the Bitcoin astrology, as well as he's going to look into some lucky time from his side. In terms of Michael Sugarman, he is talking about a new topic. It's called widowhood. Michiel Boender is also talking about his Brigu progression. And then, when we are talking about Komilla Sutton ji, Komilla Sutton is looking into Sadhesati, as well as she has picked up some analyzing Rahu Ketu from his side, so from her side, as well as there are topic which is coming from the Michael Sugarman, another new topic. So with that, I would like to this is more about the Jyotish Mela, more information. Anytime you can send email to us on arshjyotish@gmail.com to be able to, or if you are familiar with ms@jyotish, just ask us question. Only quick reminder, by October 20th, our early bird price will be getting over. So I will strongly recommend, if you are considering to come for the full conference, go ahead and register it as soon as possible. And we do consider, if somebody is facing any financial trouble, we will be happy to give you the installment option, or we can discuss the plan with you. With that, we will get into our interview session, and then I would like to introduce Vinay Aditya ji. Vinay Aditya ji is not new to us. He is a civil engineer from IIT Kanpur, and he has gone into Jyotish for decades, for 40 years. I've been knowing that Vinay Aditya ji into that. Lot of experience coming to us, so it's a big fortunate, the students are really quite fortunate to be able to hear from the masters like Vinay ji. So his books, if I talk about Dastak Varga and Dust of Destiny, is really quite famous, and it's also available on jyotish.com as well as on Amazon's for the people's convenience. He has been teaching in India as well as West. He is one of the person I know in Jyotish Mela, has been coming from throughout the Jyotish Mela last 30 years. So you can see he has taught in ACVA and the Bawa, England, or in the Europe and the Germany. So he regularly visits in the West and has been teaching and known about, also in addition to Vedic astrology, he's also known about the palmistry knowledge which he has. So, Vinay Aditya will be going to talk to Marc Boney. So with that, I will quickly get into the Marc Boney. So Marc Boney is not new to the audience in US. I have been getting requests from people about, bringing Marc Boney on our channel. So here we go. So very happy to have you, Marc, and has been going to teach in the Jyotish Mela for us. For Marc, he has been an international speaker and a faculty member of the ACVA. He has authored many articles and 22 books, which is a great accomplishment. And with that, we do see, in addition to Vedic astrology, he's also involved into a lot of Vedic sciences. And at the same time, one of the thing which I saw is he's also in the trance meditation. So many things to talk to Marc today, and Vinay ji will give us the opportunity to be asking question and all that. In terms of what he is going to teach with us, we will have opportunity to ask him question what all he is going to teach. Few of the books I would like to just mention over here from the Marc is showing up is the Gemini, which I know is really famous, coming from the Marc. Many students have learned Gemini from him. He has also written a book on Laghu Parashri, Secrets of the Shamsha, and I see a series of the Golden Keys of Jyotisha also coming from the Marc Boney. and also major predicting life event. There is a similarity of the Ashtak Varga. The Vinayji and Marc both has written the book on Ashtak Varga. And a few of the topic which is coming from Marc Boney is on November 13th is coming on the Gemini's special Karaka and the Charadasha, as well as predicting with the Gemini Karakamsha Lagna. So we can ask more questions about that. So keep your questions ready. And with that, I will pass it over to Vinayji to get started with this.
Good morning, Marc.
Good morning, Vinay. It's very good to be connected with you again. You probably won't remember this, but
we should have connected a long time back.
I agree.
Yeah, but for one reason or another, we never were face to face.
You may not remember this, Vinay, but you gave me a ride in your car back in November in 1996 in Delhi when we were coming back from the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan school.
Oh, we did.
Yes.
So I'm so sorry, I forgot about it. Though I've been hearing your name right since then. I understand you have also studied with K.N. Rao, and so have I. So our initial guru is common. I mean, I don't know if you studied with somebody else also before K.N. Rao, because you also have some background in Western astrology. So you must have studied with somebody else before that. But for me, K.N. Rao was the first one.
He was my first Jyotish Guru as well. And actually my only Jyotish Guru, K.N. Rao. I studied a little with Hart Defoe, but it wasn't that significant that way.
Okay.
Vinay, are you still there? Did we lose you? Minashki? Is Vinay there?
Vinayji is there. Yeah, it's becoming on and off. It looks like we lost him for a minute.
Yes, it does appear as if we lost him.
No, Marc, we will give Vinayji another 1 minute. Yeah, it's becoming on and off. It looks like we lost him for a minute.
I'm now getting an echo effect too. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, that's too bad.
Well, while we are waiting for him, should we just quickly talk about the topics, Marc, that you'll be teaching during the
Sure.
I think we are back. I don't know why it went off.
Well, you're with us now. You're with us now again.
Yeah. Okay. So my first question is, what prompted you to get into astrology, and when did it happen?
Well, it happened at quite a young age. When I graduated from college in 1973, the first thing I did is I joined a 2-year program that was described as a yoga seminary program. I'd met a spiritual guru in the Kriya Yoga lineage named Swami Kriyananda, who practiced Western astrology. And, it's funny, I can remember thinking that anybody who believed in astrology was either ignorant or uneducated, right? And that was my attitude towards astrology when I first met this man. But then I had the experience of him, consulting with me about my birth chart, Western astrology. And I was quite surprised when he told me that he thought I would get involved in doing astrology professionally, which turned out to be correct. And so for 20 years, I was deeply involved in Western astrology. I gave more of what you might be called a psychological consultation. People would come in and I would talk to them about what their chart reflected in terms of personality, proclivities, and tendencies, and stayed away a little bit from the predictive side. course, Western astrology does not have as many tools as Jyotish does for the predictive side. But then when K.N. Rao was brought as the second guest speaker at the International Symposium in November of 1993 by David Frawley in Northern California, I met K.N. Rao and just had an incredible experience with him being able to walk me through my life.
I was one of the persons
yes.
who saw him off in Delhi on the day he departed for USA.
I'm not surprised. And so, and then the next day, he was teaching a workshop in how to time the birth of children. He had just come out with his book, Planets and Children. So I took this workshop, and as fate would have it, when I came back to where I lived, San Diego area, somebody got word of the fact that I had done this, and I got contacted by a woman who was having trouble conceiving and having a child and wanted to know if I could predict this. I told her I was a pure beginner, but I would apply the techniques to her chart. Long story short, I was able to predict when she would have a child, and this was my first prediction with Jyotish. And at that point, I just got completely immersed in it, so enamored of the predictive techniques, the yogas of Jyotish, and then dashas of Jyotish. And then, as you know, K.N. Rao had something of a speciality in Jaimini and the Jaimini techniques. And so I myself got very, very interested in Jaimini. It's become something of a speciality for me. But I've been involved with astrology since age 22. I'm now just turned age 70. So, and I'm sure this is not the first lifetime, right?
Yeah, it seems so. When you start astrology that early, it means there must have been a pull in that direction, and that the force for that must have come from previous lives. Surely.
No question.
In fact, I was looking at your website, and it struck me that you've been in Jyotish for nearly when you started Jyotish, you were 40 years, and so was I when I joined Jyotish.
Really?
Interesting. My background in Jyotish was not from Western astrology, but I was deeply into palmistry at that time, and that led me to study astrology. And the school that was being run by K.N. Rao ji, that's where I began.
Right.
So yeah. Marc, so now that you have long time backgrounds in both Western as well as Jyotish, in your present practice, which one do you use, or do you still use both, or which one do you prefer, and why?
Well, I practice almost exclusively Jyotish. Just because, it's just so much more sophisticated form of astrology with so much more predictive power. I'm not knocking Western astrology. Western astrology, you can do a lot with Western astrology. I was able, I think, to do a lot with Western astrology, and it has its efficacy. But, I think I've used the analogy that when I went from Western astrology to Jyotish, it was like going from a typewriter to do word processing to a computer. It was just an enormous advance. There's nothing like, what makes Jyotish so unique in its predictive power is its yogas and its dashas. And of course, Western astrology doesn't have anything like that. And I'm not saying you can't predict with Western astrology, you certainly can, but with Jyotish, it's just with its vargas, its divisional charts, and just this ocean of techniques that it has for looking at a chart in so many different ways and so many predictive techniques. It's just, I think, the most sophisticated form of astrology that's ever come into being. And I practice that. I teach it, I write about it, and I practice it almost exclusively. I can't remember the last time I looked at a Western chart. So that should answer your question.
Does it mean that in all aspects of astrological readings, the Jyotish is better, superior than the Western, or Western is in some cases, in certain ways, has more accuracy than the Jyotish?
Well, it's an interesting question. I suppose because I did so much, what I call astropsychologizing. That was my background. I got a master's degree in counseling psychology, and so I was really interested in understanding a person's, you might say, personality and psychological dynamics their psychology based on the Western chart. And as I mentioned, that was kind of more the type of consultation that I did. I did so much of that for 20 years. So when I got involved in Jyotish, what really fascinated me was the being able to see events, to be able to predict events. So, and I have not gone into that aspect that much in Jyotish. That is, looking at the chart in terms of doing psychological profiling using the Jyotish chart, right? And so if I still wanted to do more of the astropsychologizing, I'd probably be better at that using the Western chart just because I was more practiced at it. And that's what I did when I was a Western astrologer versus, although my students have really been encouraging me to do a course on Jyotish on psychological profiling with the chart, which of course can be done just as well with the Jyotish system as it could be done in the Western system. I would just be more practiced at it because I did so much of it. If that, is the way I could answer that question.
In fact, that reminds me of quite a few astrologers who shifted from Western to Vedic. And when they do Vedic now, they still have some reminiscences from the Western, and they so easily get back into the transits and the squares and the trines and all that. Sure. And no, so many of them do that. It's like it's hard to forget your first love. So their first love was Western astrology, and they continue, immersing in it time and again.
Actually, I would say that I abandoned my first love and fell in love with my second love, because it's I practice what you might call, in many respects, pure classical Jyotish. Pure classical Jyotish as K.N. Rao taught it, but with, being innovative and seeing the way, as he used to talk about it, that combinations given in the ancient texts have to be seen in the light of the modern context and can have new meanings, right? But, otherwise, if students who take my courses know that I practice and I teach pure classical Jyotish.
Good, great. Anyone else in your close family who's infected with the same virus?
It is kind of an obsession, right? Actually, I'm a complete black sheep. I was raised in Catholicism, went to Catholic school, Catholic grade school, was taught by nuns and priests. And, I was kind of raised to be a professional person. I thought I was going to become a lawyer. All my siblings are in professional positions and so forth, very conventional, mainstream professions. If someone would have told me back when I was in high school that I was going to become a Jyotishi and deeply steeped in the Veda Vidya, I would have just thought that was just impossible. But that's what happened. And so I'm quite an anomaly within my family system. And amongst all my nieces and nephews, I'm known as the eccentric Uncle Mark, who's into these strange things called yoga and Ayurveda and Jyotish, but they all come to me for predictions at the same time.
Yeah. That reminds me, while there are so many commonalities between you and me, this is where we probably differ, because many people in my family started learning Jyotish once I had started. My first companion was my mother-in-law, who became my class fellow. Yeah, that wasn't very romantic though. But then after that, a lot of people, my sister, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law's sisters and nieces, etc., etc. So now when our larger family gets together, we talk about nothing but astrology.
Well,
and more people are getting drawn to astrology.
Well, but of course, in your case, it's part of the culture, right? In my case,
yeah, but not really so much. And you're right. Here also, there are a lot of people. In fact, most people, statistically speaking, who would say that astrology is for nuts. In fact, I met an old friend after very many years, and he asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Astrology." And he said, "Astrology? I don't believe in it." I said, "You would be as much a fool if you believed it, because you don't know anything about astrology, neither this way nor that way." Right. So That is the situation for most of the educated people.
I understand.
Yeah, even in India, though wherever it is practiced, there is some scope for having resonance with their daily lives and the nakshatras and the tithis, etc., etc.
Sure.
So, what are the outstanding features of your own horoscope which led you to Vedic astrology, if that is not confidential?
No, I've been pretty open about sharing my chart. I refer to it as my horoscope, not my horoscope. My horoscope. That's my joke. Well, just like every chart, it's got some good features. It's got some not so good features. I have a Virgo lagna, and so for Virgo, Venus is the 2nd and the 9th lord. I'm blessed to have the 9th lord in the 9th house, and as a result of that, I had just a wonderful father. You couldn't have asked for a better father, and I've always had great teachers such as K. N. Rao, but also my spiritual gurus, Maharishi Mahesh Yoga, Baba Haridas.
And K. N. Rao has his ascendant as Libra.
As his ascendant as Libra.
So that also fits in with you.
But I like to joke also that the tragedy of my life is that I was born in the Venus period and moved out of it for 6 months. Had I got that dasha at a different time of life, it would have been a good one. And I have a strong Jupiter. Jupiter's in Pisces in the 7th house. And thank God for Jupiter in Pisces and Venus in Taurus, because my Lagna Lord, Mercury, goes to the 8th, which of course can be good for astrology. It goes to the 8th with the 8th Lord, which can be something of an Arishta yoga. But having the natural benefics hemming it like that, it's been very attenuated, been very modified. I only have one not so significant Raja yoga in the chart. Saturn is the 5th Lord in the 1st, in a mutual glance with Jupiter in the 7th. Saturn has some strength in the Navamsha because it's in its sign Aquarius. But I'd like to say something about that combination because, I emphasize with my students that if you don't see yogas and you don't see all the yogas in the chart, you'll miss a significant thing of what a person's life has been all about. So in my chart, the fact that Jupiter is in an angle in its own sign, Saturn is in an angle, and it's getting strength in Navamsha, and the fact that Saturn is also the 5th Lord produces something, as you probably know, called Virinchi Yoga. Virinchi Yoga, it's defined by when Jupiter, Saturn, and the 5th Lord are all in angles or trines and have sources of strength. And it can really incline oneself towards the study of higher knowledge, Veda and Vedanga. Of course, Jupiter is a Vedanga. So I ran 16 years of Jupiter followed by 19 years of Saturn. And if you didn't see that, this is involved in this Virinchi Yoga, you'd not understand what has been the main theme of my life, which has been, Veda Vidya, including Jyotish. So this is what I mean, it's so important to understand the yogas in a chart and see their activation in the dasha sequence to understand what a person's life trends are going to be. You know this. I'm just, explaining how it applies to my chart. So I would say my Virinchi Yoga in my chart is one of the more significant features. I predicted in my Saturn major period that I'd have a lot of foreign students. And the reason I said, because obviously Saturn is the 5th Lord. This can give you students, it can give you children, but at my time of life, it was going to give me students, not children. But it's in the nakshatra of the sun, which of course is the 12th Lord. And I use this principle quite a bit to see the major period, see who the nakshatra Lord is, and what that may tell you about some of what that period can also bring. Of course, for anyone with Virgo, the sun is the 12th Lord. So I had predicted to a class once, before I moved into my Saturn period, that because of this combination, I was going to have a lot of students in my Saturn period, and a lot of them were going to be foreign. And the fact is, not most of them, a good portion of my students are foreign. I've been to Russia twice a year, every year since 2013, until COVID hit. And again, if you would have told me when I was in college that I was going to be going to Russia teaching an astrology from India, I would have thought that was preposterous. But that's karma, right? That's karma.
In fact, I was consulting a Nadi reader and he predicted the same thing for me, that I would have a lot of foreign students and they will take my work forward. So that seems to be happening for the last 20 years. In fact, probably I'm better known outside India than in India.
Well, you mentioned the Nadi reading. When I went to stay in K.N. Rao, this is when you gave me a ride in your car. This was in November 1996. He took me to that Brigu reader in Rajasthan, right?
And, same person. In
same person.
Yeah.
And that person told me that I was going to start a school of astrology, that I was going to have many international tours, that I was going to author all these books. And he predicted this. This was back in 1996. It really didn't start happening until 2016 when I left corporate life and started devoting myself full time to Jyotish. But the predictions came out exactly as he said.
Same here. So nothing that he told me has gone wrong, but we don't know the basis on which he was.
I've always been fascinated what was the basis of what he was saying. I've never quite understood that, but it turned out to be quite accurate. And I want to say that the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam has a special place in my heart because, first of all, in June of 1995, K.N. Rao was teaching there. That was my first time that I went there. He had brought with him this man, Yogi Karve, and I had the experience of him being able to cognize my exact birth data, including the exact time on my birth certificate. And I also met there a woman who was to be very significant in my life here for the last 26 years, and Karve-ji predicted that relationship. He told me that a relationship was going to come into my life in December of 1995. He was telling me this in June, and right on December 1 is when this woman came into my life and a relationship began that's now existed for 26 years. So it was quite a remarkable experience. And then I started teaching at the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam here the last few years. In fact, I just did a program in September there, an advanced Jaimini program. Just this last September I was there. And I love the place. It's just such a wonderful atmosphere. I can't think of a better atmosphere for teaching Jyotish or any other Veda Vidya. You know this because you've been going there for years now. And so I was really delighted to be invited to participate in the Jyotish Kumbh Mela. Vinay, I understand that you were instrumental in making that happen. So I want to thank you personally for that as well.
Yeah, but you've been holding classes in the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam.
I have been, yes.
Just as Penny does.
Yes. In fact, it was Penny. It was Penny who invited me to teach a group of her senior students, teach them Jaimini, because that's not something Hart Defoe, her teacher, taught. It's not something she taught. So she brought me, and this is where I met people like Neelima, who I know you know. I met Neelima because she was part of. And we've become good friends. So yes, I've been teaching since I guess that was 2016. I started teaching there once a year until, of course, COVID happened. But then just this last year again. And my intention is to continue to teach there, regularly, at least once a year, and hopefully now part of the Jyotish Kumbh Mela as well.
Good. Can I ask you something about your publications and your writings? I understand you've written 22 books and more than 50 articles here and there. So what are you writing these days?
Well, I started this thing in 2016 that I called the Jyotish Journal, in which people sign up, they get a subscription, they get an article every month. And so I've been writing an article every month ever since then. It's the total of articles is now up to 70 articles, actually. And these are all on Amazon.com. My latest article was on the close timing of close timing of childbirth, where I was showing by using both Jaimini techniques and Parashari techniques, you can time the birth of the child within a 3-day period. And actually, in that article, I predicted that a child would be born on either the 22nd of September or the 21st of September to a Russian student of mine. And it turns out the child was born on the 21st. So I'm showing the application of these techniques and then made a prediction at the end of the article that came out. The credit all goes to K.N. Rao. Most everything I learned from him. I like to say my Jyotish is a pale imitation of K.N. Rao's. K.N. Rao's pale imitation of K.N. Rao, though, makes a strong impression. And so each month I write an article, and then I collect those articles into books. So 22 of those books are 11 collections of those articles, but then I have a lot of different books on separate topics. She showed some of the titles. I've written 2 books on Jaimini, The Essentials of Jaimini, Jewels of Jaimini. I wrote a book called Seekers of the Shamsha. I did a commentary, original translation and commentary on the Law Guru Parashari. I just published a book called Studies in Medical Astrology. What else? Oh, there's a book about predicting major life events, where I'm showing K.N. Rao's approach of using the composite technique of combining Jaimini with Parashari to improve predictive accuracy. So these are all on Amazon.com, either in a e-format, Kindle format, and or print format. I wanted to create a legacy of Vinay, kind of following in K.N. Rao's footsteps, where I wanted to sort of carry on the tradition and have it be something that I left behind in the world. This is why I've really focused on being so much an author. I actually stopped consulting because it was kind of consuming all my time. Stopped in 2016 and became more of what I call an academic Jyotishi, where I researched, I wrote, and I taught. I still give predictions to people, but I'm not consulting for the general public anymore.
Okay. You are following the system of Jaimini that K.N. Rao has taught you, because he is in many ways different from the classics.
As I said, my Jyotish is a pale imitation of K.N. Rao's. So the Jaimini.
So if he has any limitations, then he has passed on to you also.
That's true. Now, I've studied the Jaimini text in the original. In fact, I've done an original translation of all 4 parts of the first chapter, and I've published those in my books, The Essentials of Jaimini and then The Jewels of Jaimini, and written a commentary on those with illustrations. So I'm not going to say that I have exclusively learned Jaimini from K.N. Rao. I like to tell my students, Vinay, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, that Jyotish teaches you Jyotish. If you work on charts and you want to see them in relationship to a person's life events and how those events are coming off in the two different systems, it teaches you about that, right? So, if you don't mind, I'll tell a quick little story. When I was with K.N. Rao in India and we had traveled to see the Brigu reader, it was just him and I, and we were having dinner one night, and I expressed at that time my ambition to become a good predictor like him. And I asked him what he recommended. And what he told me was that, he said, Mark, for over a 10-year period, work on thousands of charts in which you're noting the correlation between the events that happen in a person's life and the astrological factors. And he said, and after that, you'll be a good predictor. Well, that was a little intimidating, right? 10 years, thousands of charts. But when I did that, and I still can't predict like him, but it did teach me how to predict, and I've had good predictive success, particularly with a certain set of questions that are typically asked in a Jyotish consultation. And that was my book, Predicting Major Life Events. There's 8 events there, things like career rise, childbirth, purchase of property, marriage, spiritual initiation, good financial periods. These are the kind of things that people ask about over and over again. And these are the things that I've concentrated on. And, Jyotish will teach you Jyotish if you work on charts. And that was his recommendation, and that's my recommendation to students.
Yeah, of course. In fact, any art, any science, unless you practice it, it doesn't lead you anywhere. So practice is the key thing. In fact, in Jyotish, I find that even if you have a wrongest principle in your mind, and if you want to prove it to be right, you can show a few charts and prove the principle which is absolutely rubbish. So that is the art of, how to stay away from that rubbish.
Right, exactly.
So that is why classics are so important, because in the modern times, there are youngsters who are coming out with a lot of different interpretations of the originals, and they're experimenting. Well, it's good to experiment, but one should not lose touch of the classics.
Not at all.
That is an essential thing.
Those principles are timeless.
Yes. In fact, I am reminded of a person who, an American white person, who came to my house in Delhi maybe 20 years back or so. He was also a Catholic priest to begin with. He was well versed with Western astrology, and he has made forays into Vedic also. So I asked him the standard question, which I asked you also, that which one do you use in your practice? He gave me a very interesting answer. And that answer should be instructive for a lot of our students. He said that if there is a new customer, I ask him 3 questions. And based on the answers to those 3 questions, I decide which system to use, Western or the Vedic.
I see.
Yeah. And I said, and what are those questions? He told me those questions, which of course I have forgotten what were they, because the crux of the matter was in those questions. But what I still remember is that he wanted to gauge the spiritual content of this person's mind. If he was even slightly inclined towards spirituality, he would use the Vedic chart. And if it was not so, then he would use the Western chart. I told him, but everyone is spiritual, at least to some extent. He said, no, you don't know Americans. And that was the time when I had not started coming to US. So I was wondering if that is true, that there is not an iota of spirituality in many of the young people there. Is that true?
Well, Vinay, what I like to say is that we all have spirituality because we all have the spirit within. Now, others may be awakened to it more than others and express it more, but all of us have that, we're all spirit in essence. And so there's spirituality in all of us. Some people obviously are born and then live a life where that becomes the primary value in life, pursuit of spiritual goals. Other people, not at all. So there's awakened spirituality, and then there's what I would call dormant spirituality. I don't really see how either the Western chart or the Vedic chart, why you would use one as being more just related to the mundane and the other more to spiritual life. I'd be interested to have that conversation with him about how he made that differentiation.
I think what he was doing was that he was again stressing more on the sun sign, like they do in Western. And in Vedic, you give more importance to the moon sign. So, and sun being, and the zodiacs are different. There's a significant difference. When you call Virgo, the Western Virgo is very different from the Vedic Virgo. So how it can be the same? Because when you study the books, the characteristics of Virgo are the same in both the systems. Yet they refer to different parts of the arc of the zodiac.
What I found about that, because this was a real conflict for me when, having been a Western astrologer for 20 years, now I'm using the sidereal zodiac, all the planetary placements are different. How can they both be true? Or how can them both be valid? This is defies logic. What I discovered is that the same things show up in different ways. I'll use my own chart as an example. In the Western system, I have a lot of Virgo characteristics. When you describe Virgo and what's given in both Western and Vedic astrology as characteristics of being analytical and detail oriented and all these sorts of things. In the Western system, I was a Virgo moon. In the Vedic system, my Lagna is Virgo. So, the same thing is showing up just in a different way. Of course, there's only one person with one personality, with one karma, and that's going to get reflected. If a system of astrology is valid, it's got to be reflected accurately, right?
That's quite true. That's quite true.